Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about perpendicular bisector. Our objective is that students will be able to generate the equations of perpendicular bisector. So what does perpendicular bisector means? Most of you know that perpendicular means that the lines form a 90-degree angle, and bisect means you cut it in the middle. So when we're talking about perpendicular bisector, we are looking for the equation of a line that cuts 2 points and it goes directly in the middle, something that looks like this guy right here. In order to do this, there are 5 steps that we need to complete. So it's similar to what we've been doing with parallel and perpendicular lines. So the difference here is that we're going to be given 2 sets of coordinates. So the first step is that we will find the slope. Step 2 would be we use that slope we found and get the perpendicular slope. That's when we do the opposite reciprocal. Step 3, we use those coordinates and we find the midpoint. Now, after we find the midpoint, this is exactly what we have been doing for the past couple of days, where we identify what's my slope, what's my perpendicular slope, what's my x, what's my y, and then of course my b is always the question mark. After we get that, the final step is to write the equation using the new slope, which we found in step 2, and the y-intercept that we found in step 5. What I want you guys to do is to pause the video, copy these 5 steps in your notebook. Then I want you to go ahead and copy this full example. Yes, everything step by step. So write the equation of a perpendicular bisector that goes through the line segment with endpoints of A 2, 1 and B 6, negative 3. So here we're going to look at, and I'll show you with the 5 steps. So the first step is that we find the slope. So remember, your slope is your changing y over changing x. So I'm going to label this x1, y1, x2, y2, and then I'm going to go ahead and substitute this. So it's negative 3 minus 1 over 6 minus 2. When we simplify, this is negative 4 over 4, which is equal to negative 1. So your slope is negative 1. What would make my perpendicular slope? So my perpendicular slope would be positive 1, because remember, this is the same thing as saying negative 1 over 1. And then if I was to flip that, it would be 1 over 1, and this negative that becomes positive, which simplifies to 1. So this is one of the information that I'm going to use. I'm going to circle that. Because it's a bisector, we cut it in the middle, I need the midpoint. So remember, midpoints are always coordinates. So the midpoint formula says add our x's, which is 2 plus 6, and middle means divided by 2. 1 plus negative 3 divided by 2. And 6 plus 2 is 8, divided by 2 is 4. And 1 plus negative 3 is negative 2. Negative 2 divided by 2 is actually negative 1. So this is what we're going to be using for my x and y, because it needs to go through these points. Normally in the parallel and perpendicular lines, we tell you which points it's going through. With these, we have to find where it's going through. Now here is where you do your slope, the perpendicular slope, your x, your y, and then my b becomes my question mark. So let's fill this out. My slope originally was negative 1. My perpendicular slope is 1. My x is 4. And my y is negative 1. Remember, these guys are coming from step 3. I go ahead now and I substitute this into y equals mx plus b. And this is almost identical to what we've been doing with the perpendicular line. Because it's a perpendicular bisector, I'm going to use the perpendicular slope. So negative 1 equals 1 times 4 plus b. Negative 1 is equal to 4 plus b. I would get b by itself, minus 4 on both sides. That's cancel. Negative 5 equals b. And then remember your final step. write the equation using the new slope that we found, meaning the perpendicular slope and the y-intercept. So your final equation and answer is y equals 1x minus 5, or some people like to call it y equals x minus 5. That's the equation of the perpendicular bisector. Like I said, I know it's a lot of steps, it's tedious, but it's straightforward and simple. I'll do one more example with you, but before you move on in this video, I want you to pause it, copy everything, rewatch it if you need to, but make sure you get this, understand every steps, add a comment, ask me any questions that you may have regarding this. We'll do one more example. Here is the other example. Again, it's a perpendicular bisector. These are my coordinates. So step 1, we'll find the slope. Remember to always label x1, y1, x2, y2. 5 minus negative 1 over 3 minus 3. This is actually 6 over 0. Remember, super important, you cannot divide by 0, so that's actually undefined, right? And we have done this before when we did proving quadrilaterals. If your slope is undefined, then your perpendicular slope is 0. Midpoint. Add your x's. I'll come on this corner. 3 plus 3 divided by 2. Negative 1 plus 5 divided by 2. And then we're going to work this out. 3 plus 3 is 6. Divided by 2 is 3. Negative 1 plus 5 is 4. Divided by 2 is 2. Again, I'm doing these in my head, but you can also use your calculator. Remember, I told you go to the App Store and get the calculator. So here we're going to say your slope is undefined. Your perpendicular slope is 0. Your x is 3. Your y is 2. And as like always, this is, the b is question mark. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and solve. So we get y equals mx plus b. This will be 2 equals 0 times 3 plus b. This becomes 2 equals 0 plus b. Your b is actually 2. Alrighty, now I have my new b, my new y-intercept, and I know that the slope is 0. So when I write this equation now, it'll be y equals 0x plus 2. But what's 0 times anything? Yep, it is 0. So your final answer should say y equals 2. Here we go. That's about it for today's lesson. The most important thing I want you guys to remember is that 0 and undefined, they're reciprocals of each other. So again, a couple things that you should make sure you have is both examples in your notebook as well as the 5 steps that you're going to follow in order to do this. Now attached would be some questions that you have to practice based on this set of information. You are going to read the instruction and then hand those back in to me. Have a great day.